So it's a mad, mad, mad cyber world we live in. How is this world working? What makes it tick? Where is it going and evolving every day as millions of new devices every single day are plugged into the global internet? That's what we're going to be discussing today. And can we be safe in this new digital world? Now, one of the good things about the internet is we can crowdsource intelligence and get a lot of information. But there's one way to better crowdsource in the internet, and what's that? Crowdsource in the room. So I'm going to ask for your help to get this started. So I'd like to know and see with a show of hands, how many of you in the room deal with some aspect of the issue of cybersecurity in your jobs? How many people? Wow, more than I expected. It looks like roughly 50, 60%. How many, second question, how many people in the room have experienced identity theft, personally or in your family? Okay, but fortunately a lower number, about 10%, 15, 20. And you know how obnoxious that experience is, right? And how violated you feel. Now the final question is, do we have anyone in the room today who does not carry a smartphone? Do we have anyone? I've had 2 hands rise up in the last year. I've spoken to probably 20,000 people. None today. So we all have these devices. We're tethered to them. They affect our lives. Well, all stories that matter are really personal stories. So I'll start with a personal story on how I got involved with cybersecurity. And it was the 11th of September, 2001. I was on a plane on the tarmac in LaGuardia Airport in New York City when the plane stopped suddenly. And on the second announcement, the pilot said, the second World Trade Center tower has just been hit by a commercial jet. And we've been instructed to go back to the gate in the terminal immediately. We did, and when we got back to the terminal, it was silent as a morgue. You could have heard a pin drop because everyone was watching the Twin Towers burning on the CNN TV monitors above. And I saw people over at the window on the side like this with their hands, and I thought, what are they doing? And so I went over there. And from that position, I saw that we could see the Twin Towers burning with our naked eyes. And I had been inside those towers more than 100 times because I had 15 clients for my software company that I had started in those towers. And I tried to figure out who's above the fire line and is probably going to die and who's below, and I felt horrible. So I took a moment in silence to pray for those people because I didn't know what else I could possibly do. And a few moments later, the following words came to me that have guided my life ever since. And those words very simply were, it's a small world, it's a fragile world, and no one is safe until everyone is safe. And you are called to serve the peace. So those words came to me on 9/11. And those words have guided my life since and actually led me to work on peace in this region that led to the book, and the book led to me serving the U.S. government in the highest levels of cybersecurity because the book was about decentralized networks. And so look at those words, and no one is safe until everyone is safe. So we're going to start out today by looking at the reality. What's the reality in the cyber world? And that's going to bring some despair because we're going to look at some doomsday scenarios that are entirely possible, that we need to work together to avoid. But then we're going to move on constructively into models to understand what's going on so that you as leaders, as policymakers, heads of state, can help evolve the system in the right direction. So to give you an idea of the reality today, even if you buy the most expensive security appliances and technology in the world, firewalls, intrusion detection, et cetera, the bad guys are still getting through. This is a map of people on the inside of a corporate network that have already made it there. This is a real map of real data from a tier 1 financial services institution, where a new set of technology using artificial intelligence is picking up attacks from all over the world that's been missed by every other system. So the reality is there's 2 kinds of organizations in the world. Those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked yet. You can call it the state of denial or just not being informed. The reality can be summed up in 12 words. This is a law, and it's very, very, very simple. Number one, anything networked can be hacked. So you can repeat that with me. Anything networked can be hacked. Number two, everything is being networked. Right? So you can repeat after me. Everything is being networked. So number three, you can probably guess what it's going to say, right? Everything is vulnerable. This is Beckstrom's law of cybersecurity. It's 12 words. It's brutally simple. It's reality. And nothing has convinced me otherwise in the 5 years since this law was developed. This is the baseline. It's a reality we all live in. We still have to make strenuous efforts in security. We have to deal with these issues as best we can. So let's look at some doomsday scenarios that unfortunately are not too far off from being possible. This is a Trident a Trident missile. It's a nuclear warhead made in the US decades ago. You'll see some corrosion on the nose cone. Now, in nuclear facilities, we try to use a security technique which is called an air gap. And an air gap in security means that there's air between the network or the computers that are at the facility and the rest of the outside world. So ideally, at a nuclear power plant or at a nuclear weapons facility, there is no connection to the internet, right? That's called an air gap. That's what we want to believe and we want to think. Well, until a couple of years ago, a security researcher discovered that computers that had no connection to the network, they had no Wi-Fi card, no Bluetooth, no Ethernet, they were unconnected, were communicating to one another, and one was being attacked by the other through ultrasonic sound. A virus using ultrasonic sound. Remember fax machines would screech and transfer data through noise? Well, you can transfer data through noise between your phone and a computer at ultrasonic levels you cannot hear. So if your device still has a microphone and a speaker, it can still bridge that air gap. So the facilities that we would like to think are air-gapped in the world may not be air-gapped, because how many facilities have no satellite phones or cell phones or other devices that might communicate? So one bad scenario is that we have a nuclear incident because of a cyber attack. And I'll talk about a case story later to give more depth on that. So that's a serious concern, and until we have zero nuclear weapons, it's a serious risk. And that's why many countries and many leaders are pushing for global zero. At least there's a reduction in the weapons, but they're still there. This is a substation, burning, electric substation. Can you cause this attack by software alone? Answer, yes, absolutely. You can blow up transformers with a software attack. And some scientists estimate that 80% of the transformers in the US could be blown up, for example, with a software attack only. Tremendous vulnerability. Why? Because everything depends on the grid, right? Everything depends on the electricity grid. And if the electricity grid goes down, we've got a huge problem. Now, can the grid go down? You bet it can. What should we do? Probably take an unorthodox approach. We should decentralize the grid. And I saw your exhibits out there, and here in this country, in this region, other parts of the world, we're moving towards solar and alternatives. What you also want to do is have buildings be independent of the grid, be able to switch them off, because other countries can't take down your national grid if you've got 10,000 or 100,000 microgrids, and they're not connected to the internet. So it's something to think about. But absolutely, the grid is vulnerable, and we've seen those attacks. This was a posting by someone saying they were with Anonymous that I received notification of because it was my responsibility on February 12, 2012, when Anonymous, or someone representing to represent Anonymous, posted Operation Global Blackout. The last sentence there says, on March 31st, we will shut the internet down. The rest of the notification on Pastebin goes on to say how exactly they were going to take it down, by attacking the 13 root servers of the global domain name system and identifying specifically, here are the IP addresses, global forces we need to prepare to attack in 6 weeks' time to shut the entire global internet down. Is it possible? Unfortunately, yes. It became more concerning when they said not only can we lodge a massive distributed denial of service attack. And what that is like your mailbox. If your mailbox can take 100 letters, what happens if you send 100 billion letters to that mailbox? Well, soon your whole house, the whole neighborhood is covered with letters, and what you can't get to the mailbox. That's what a distributed denial of service attack is like. But they said, no, beyond that, beyond the fact we have massive resources to do that, we're already in every one of your servers that are key around the world. We're already staged with malware that can shut these devices off. It's greatly concerning. Fortunately, it did not come to pass. And 15 minutes before the scheduled hour of the global attack, which led to massive resources around the world and amazing collaboration, a video came out saying it's not going to happen. We're not going to do it, with a very elaborate video from Anonymous explaining why not, why this would not happen, why they would not do it. But it was interesting timing that it arrived exactly 15 minutes before the attack. So that's a risk. This is a view from our home in Santa Cruz, California. We look at the Pacific Ocean. In the sky, you see clouds. We're all moving to cloud computing. What's our next doomsday scenario? The clouds go down, okay? Raining huge hail balls of ice. Or more specifically, if you look at cloud computing, 80% of it in the world today is by one company, Amazon. Great firm, they do good security, but what if there's a successful attack on that one provider, not to mention the top 3 or 5? You've got a major outage on your hand. And the cloud is used for attacks. The DDoS attacks that happen today don't come from zombie computers in your grandmother's house. They come from fake cloud accounts that get set up by the millions and spun up. So the cloud is a new attack surface, and it's a point of vulnerability. So those are some doomsday scenarios, but let's get constructive. Let's look at threats for a moment. So I want to give you some models for thinking about the space so you can understand it and make decisions. At the lowest level, you have the lone hacker. They can do quite a bit of damage today because there's tremendous open source free tools they can use. Thank you, Tim O'Reilly. I'm just kidding, not that it's your fault, but you contributed to the open source movement. There's tremendous tools they can use. Above them are the hacktivist networks. They have very significant capabilities, as we've seen all over the world. And above them are the organized crime networks. Some individual organized crime networks spend up to $100 million a year now on cyber offense and defense. Above them are state actors. The most sophisticated actors in the world are the top state actors. All of them build on Metasploit. Now, most of us haven't heard of Metasploit, but I'm curious, how many people have heard of Metasploit? Okay, Metasploit is an open, free database of exploits that allow you to break into computers and systems. It's used both by good guys to test systems and by bad guys to break into your computers. That's the baseline everyone can use. The regulators in general are below that because regulations tend to be backward-looking and auditing tends to be backward-looking. So those are the threat landscape. And then the biggest threat is Insider Joe or Sally or whoever it might be. Insiders account for about a third to half of all attacks. That's a threat landscape. Now let's talk about the mad world. What does that stand for? The first MAD is mutual assured destruction from the nuclear era. We still have it. It's a stabilizing force. It has prevented another world war from occurring. And it's a factor in cybersecurity because it affects geopolitics. The second MAD, cyber MAD, is cyber mutual assured disruption. It's the capability to completely bring down another country or an economy by attacking various electronic systems. And that's a negative, and it's different than nuclear MAD because we don't know how many players can do this, because you can hire people to do it or you can buy the technology. So it's not limited to big nation states. It's much more complex than a nuclear era. And then finally, we have internet MAD, which is internet mutual assured dependence. We're all dependent on these smartphones. I mean, we're talking about how bad this world is. Is there anyone in the room who's ready to give up your smartphone? Right? We don't want to give them up. We don't want to give them up. We're dependent. That's a positive factor. Case in point of this model is Stuxnet. Stuxnet is one of the most sophisticated computer attacks that was ever developed. It's a computer worm that attacked the nuclear centrifuges in Iran with the goal of having them physically self-destruct. And it was sophisticated software that moved across Microsoft Windows machines into Siemens industrial controllers and got these centrifuges to spin faster than 100,000 RPM, and they exploded, physically exploded. It was created to stop nuclear proliferation. It's from nuclear mad era because parties felt weapons were being developed and it was inappropriate. So it reflects that. Secondly, it certainly shows cyber mutual assured disruption, because that was a cyber attack that disrupted physical and industrial activities, in this case, a nuclear enrichment facility. And then finally, internet mad is related because ultimately those things were transmitted across the internet and then across the air gap with a little USB stick. And it's contained by the fact we're all dependent upon the network. So Stuxnet shows the validity of the model. Now let's look at some countries that have been knocked offline in cyber. Estonia, 2007, completely offline for 2 weeks. Georgia, completely knocked offline and then invaded physically by tanks and armies. Kyrgyzstan, knocked offline. Egypt, knocked offline by itself, okay? The leaders decided to unplug. They tried to unplug. And some of us were working really hard to make sure that the internet kept working for bits of Egypt. And the Ukraine, recently, December 23rd, 700,000 people in Ukraine had all their power go out for 6 hours because of a cyber attack, just December 23rd, 2015. Now, let's look at another country. Anyone recognize this country? Switzerland, exactly. So who's going to attack Switzerland? What nation state? Nobody. No one's going to attack Switzerland. Why? Because they don't have enemies. Because they're neutral. Because they developed a posture of neutrality that they've worked on for 700 years, and they've built really good defenses, but their strategy has been to be neutral. And because of that, they've affected their cyber risk profile, because they're not worried about nation states going after them. They only have to worry about hacktivist networks and, to a greater extent, organized crime trying to get money out of those banks. And I bring this up because how you relate to the world as a country or as a government or as a company affects how that world treats you. Any grievances that are not resolved are likely to be expressed on the cyber realm. And that's why we have such active cyber attacks in the world today. So what can be done? First this is just a distribution curve showing 100 top companies' rating of their own risk management skills. And the reality is most of them say we're doing almost nothing or we're just beginning. None of them said we have a robust cyber capability. Zero. So we're all beginning in this, and we've all got to work together. Where are we moving? One of the places we're moving is to move the traditional domain of technology management and the security, which is becoming increasingly complex, and integrating it with traditional risk management and even the kind of analysis we do in the financial services markets, because we need to know the economic costs of possible losses to figure out where we should place the investment and to figure out what the payoff is of different investments. So cyber risk management's really taking off at the present time, and it's something that everyone has a chance to shape. I'm really excited about it because I'm a risk management geek. The first company I started when I was 24 was a derivative trading and firm-wide risk management software company that we took public, and it was just a fascinating experience. So I love finance and economics as well as security. So this is an important new development and a model to think about. So I want to summarize the three models so we remember them. One, we had the threat model, right? Looking from lone hackers up to the nation state. Secondly, looking at cyber risk management. And finally, the mad world. And then also we talked about the model of no one's safe until everyone's safe. And it's certainly not a safe system out there right now. And then we talked about Beckstrom's law of cybersecurity and how everything's vulnerable. So what are a few things concretely we can do? So, what any government can do is, number one, remember these models. Remember the reality and the models. Because we have to develop this sort of philosophy of cybersecurity. We have to think about how's the system working? What are the ethics? And what are the real system dynamics if we're going to have good policy recommendations that are actually going to have an impact and not just spend billions of dollars? Secondly, promote competencies and multi-stakeholder engagement. Everyone's got to be involved in solving this problem. No one can do it alone. You can't have one great department or to do it alone. Third, don't regulate. Do not focus on regulation because it's not going to get you where you want to be. Fourth, do invest. And finally, promote cyber risk management. And the NIST framework from the U.S. Department of Commerce points things in that direction. And there's a big movement in the U.S. and elsewhere. So those are a few thoughts. The others I would add is think about decentralizing your grids and your power systems, because that is critical for the security of your country. And you can do that easily over a multi-year and a multi-decade time frame. So these are some summary thoughts. And I thank you for this opportunity to discuss our mad, mad, mad world and what you as leaders can do about it. Thank you so much.